Today is Wednesday, November 4th. Let's go ahead and go over your memory scripture for this week. It comes out of the book of Matthew 22:37. It says, Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." Matthew 22:37. Monday, we discussed how Joseph was in prison. Remember, Potiphar's wife lied on him. That's why he was thrown in prison. And although he was thrown in prison, the Lord was still with him. And eventually, because Joseph worked hard and because he had the favor of God on him, he was put in charge of all the other prisoners in jail. So God had blessed Joseph even while he was in prison. And so, remember, there was the baker and the butler who had come from King Pharaoh's palace, and they were thrown into prison. And they had some dreams that they didn't understand. And so Joseph, through the help of the Lord, Joseph was able to interpret their dreams for them. So the butler tells Joseph his dream. He said he saw a branch, and it had like three grapes growing from it. And he said that he squeezed one of the bundles of grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and he gave Pharaoh his cup. And so his dream meant something good. Remember, Joseph said that in 3 days, the butler would return back to the palace, and he would continue to serve King Pharaoh. And then the baker tells Joseph his dreams, and he says that he had 3 baskets on his head. And in the top basket, there was like different kinds of breads and rolls. And he said, but then the birds came to eat the bread. And so, unfortunately, the baker did not have a good meaning to his dream. And in 3 days, he would actually be executed. So 3 days passed, and exactly what Joseph said in the dreams, that is what happened. And so the butler and Joseph had made an agreement. Joseph said, whenever you go back to Pharaoh's palace, please tell him about me. I was wrongly thrown into prison. I'm innocent. Tell him how I helped you out. And the butler was like, oh, yeah, of course. But time went on, and nobody came to get Joseph out of prison. And so remember, it was 2 years before the butler even remembered Joseph. And this is why. Remember, Pharaoh one day had bad dreams, and Pharaoh didn't understand what his dreams were about. And he tried to get his wise men, the men who, serve him, to understand the dreams. He tried to get them to help him out, but they couldn't. They were like, we don't know what the dreams mean. And then finally the butler remembered, oh wait, there was this man when I was in jail who helped me interpret my dreams, and I'm sure he could help you too, Pharaoh. So Pharaoh ordered his soldiers to go and get Joseph out of prison and bring him to the palace. So Joseph was brought before Pharaoh, and Joseph explained that it's God's business to interpret dreams, and that if Pharaoh told him his dreams, God will reveal what the dreams meant. And so Pharaoh begins to tell Joseph the dreams that he had. And so in his first dream, he said he was standing by the Nile River, and he saw 7 fat cows, and then 7 skinny, thin cows came up out of the river and ate the fat cows, but they were just as skinny as before. And so he didn't understand. And then he told Joseph the second dream he had. He said there was a corn stalk that had 7 good, healthy ears of corn that grew on it, but then 7 dry, withered ears of corn grew and ate the healthy ones, but they were just as dry and withered and dead before. So he was like, I don't understand. He says the dreams are similar, but I don't understand what they mean. And so Joseph told him that the Lord was preparing Pharaoh and warning Pharaoh about what was to come. And so the Lord was going to do 7 years of plenty, meaning the land of Egypt would grow. Everything would grow in Egypt. They would have an abundance of crops, everything. It would be a blessed time, a blessed 7 years. But right after those 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine would come. It would actually be the worst famine that has ever hit Egypt. And a famine is just when there is no food. Nothing's growing. Everything is dry and just dead. So it's a time where you really don't have food. And so he told Pharaoh, he said, this is what's going to happen. That's what God was showing you in the dream. 7 years of plenty. And then right after that, there will be 7 years of famine. And so Pharaoh says, okay, well, what do you think we should do? And Joseph said, well, you should choose a wise man, the wisest man in all of Egypt, to be in charge of collecting food and storing food during the 7 years of plenty, so that when the famine comes, the wise man would have prepared for the famine, and we would have storehouses of food saved. And so Pharaoh thought that was a great idea. Pharaoh said, well, there's nobody else we should pick but you, Joseph. And so he chose Joseph to be the one in charge of taking care of the storehouses. So Joseph went from being thrown into the pit, sold as a slave, working as a slave, then lied on, thrown into prison, all of that bad that he went through. And now he was raised up to be second in command right under Pharaoh. That's how high of a position Pharaoh gave him. And it was the Lord. We know God raises up and God puts down. But God used Pharaoh to place Joseph in that position. And so all the stuff that Joseph went through was for God's glory. And we see how in due time, God raised Joseph up. And so Joseph, he ends up getting a wife. He's now wearing nice clothing. He has his own chariot. Remember, he had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Both of those sons, their names meant, they meant something, just describing everything that he went through, but he saw how God worked it all together for his good. And so Joseph said that all the bad that he went through couldn't even be compared to how blessed and how much favor God had placed upon him right now. And we know that God was with him through everything, right? God kept him through it all. And so now Joseph is second in command in Egypt. And so when the people see Joseph, they actually had to bow in honor and respect to him. So that's how much authority he had. And so that was our lessons on Monday and Tuesday. So remember, the famine not only hit Egypt, but the famine hit like the entire land surrounding Egypt. So I told you that was also including the promised land as well. And so that means Joseph's family, his 10 brothers and Benjamin, his younger brother, they all were affected by the famine as well. In areas where the famine had hit, everyone knew that Egypt was the place to go if you wanted to find food. And so remember, everybody was hit by the famine, not only Egypt, just everywhere around it. And so Jacob, that's Joseph's father, remember Jacob? Joseph's father, he heard that there was food in Egypt that he could buy. And so he told his sons, he said, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Go down and buy some for us before we all starve. So Jacob's 10 older sons, which would be Joseph's 10 older brothers, those same brothers that sold him into slavery, they all went down to Egypt to buy grain. Now, Benjamin didn't go. Remember, there's still Benjamin, the younger brother, but Jacob, kept him close to him, especially after he lost Joseph. So he thinks he lost Joseph. He keeps Benjamin close to him. That was the only 2 sons that Rachel had, Joseph and Benjamin. Okay. So the 10 older sons, they go down to Egypt and they asked around where should they buy Egypt and should they buy grain, and they directed them on where they should go. They should go to the ruler because he was in charge of all of the grain sales. So they went and they met the ruler, and when they went, they bowed low before him. Now, the thing is, they don't know that this man is their brother, Joseph. They are thinking, oh, it's just another Egyptian man. Now, the Egyptians dressed differently from the Hebrews. The Egyptians wore like a lot more flashy clothing, you could say. And the Hebrews were they wore like just robes and stuff like that. So, especially if you were an Egyptian who had like authority and power, you really wore like different types of garments. And so when they saw Joseph, they just assumed because of what he had on that he was just a regular Egyptian. They didn't think that he was Joseph. And plus, they hadn't seen him in years, like over 10 years. So, Joseph was a young boy. He was a young man. He was 17 when he left, when they sold him as a slave. And so now they're like, he's a man, so they didn't really recognize who he was. So they go before this ruler bowing down. So now we see those dreams come to pass. Remember the dreams that God had given Joseph years before, where his brothers' bundles of wheat bowed to his, the sun, moon, and star bowed to him. well, this is it right here. So God was showing what would come. God was prophesying what would happen in the future. And that's exactly what's happening now. They're bowing down to Joseph, not knowing that it's Joseph, but look at that. And so Joseph, though, he recognized who they were. They didn't know who Joseph was, but Joseph immediately knew exactly who they were. And so he didn't want to let them know, though, who he was. He wanted to see if their hearts had changed during those times, because last time he saw his brothers, they were selling him as a slave. So he was like, I'm not going to show them who I am just yet. So he also spoke in Egyptian. So Joseph could speak in Hebrew, but he spoke in Egyptian so that they wouldn't know that he was a Hebrew. So he decided to treat them rough and test them. So he spoke to them and said, where are you from? Now, he spoke through an interpreter. He had someone speaking, for him. And so they replied, from the land of Canaan, we have come to buy corn. And Joseph said, no, you are spies. You have come to see how poor and how bad the famine has affected our land. And they were like, no, there are 12 of us, sir, and we are honest men. Our father is in the land of Canaan, and our younger brother is in there with them, and one of our brothers is dead. And Joseph listened to them, and he wanted to see his younger brother Benjamin. And so he said, I'm going to take a chance that you are honorable men. One of you will stay here in jail, and the rest of you can go home with grain for your families. But I want you to come back and bring your youngest brother in order for me to know if you're telling the truth. And that is the only way you will get your other brother out of prison, is if you go home and bring back your younger brother. So talking among themselves, the brothers were like, oh, goodness. And they already knew that Jacob wouldn't want Benjamin to go. And so, he kept him from going this time. So finally they decided to, okay, well, we're going to go back home and see what our father says. So they chose Simeon to stay, and he was actually put in jail because one brother had to stay behind while they went to go and get Benjamin. So Simeon stays behind, and the other brothers go back home. They did get some grain. They filled their sacks with grain to bring home, but they're missing a brother, Simeon, and now they have to go home to get Benjamin to bring him back to Egypt. So whenever they were on their way back home, they ended up stopping for the night, and they opened their sacks, and they ended up finding that the money that they had given to Joseph to buy the food was put back in their sacks. So they couldn't understand. They were like, wait, why is our money back? We paid him that money. Why is it back in our sacks? And so they couldn't understand how it got there. But of course, they didn't know that Joseph was actually the one. He told his servants to put the money back in their sacks. Joseph didn't want to charge them, I guess, So when they arrived home, they told their father Jacob all that had happened, and how the ruler in Egypt was kind of, rough with them, and that Simeon was in jail, and the only way for Simeon to get out of jail was for them to go back to Egypt with Benjamin. They said the ruler wants to see and make sure that we're telling the truth. He thought we were spies, and we were trying to prove to him that we're not spies. He's testing us. And so they were like, we need Benjamin to come back with us so we can get Simeon out. And so Jacob's like, Benjamin? He says no. He says, Joseph didn't come back home when I sent him to go and find you all, and now you're asking for me to send Benjamin away, and Simeon is in prison? Jacob's like, no, I can't lose any more sons. He said, no, there's no way that I could let this happen. And so again and again, they tried to get their father to, give in, like, Dad, please, we'll take care of him. But Jacob was like, no, I'm not letting Benjamin go. And so now the brothers are like, what are we going to do? Simeon's in jail. We can't go get him out unless we come back with Benjamin. But father doesn't want to let Benjamin go. So they didn't know what to do. So tomorrow we will talk about what will happen, and if Jacob will finally give in or not. So that's our Bible lesson for today.